the ACA or Obamacare. And today I'm going to talk about how you can get coverage under the ACA in 2015. First slide. So like I said, this webinar is going to focus on how to get health coverage for 2015 through the new coverage options that were created in the 2010 health reform law. First, I'm going to touch on some of the main components of the law, and then I'm going to describe two main types of coverage you might be eligible for if you don't have access to good employer-sponsored coverage. I'm also going to talk about what you might need to do if you got coverage last year and want to continue it. Next slide. So the Affordable Care Act, or the ACA, which is sometimes known as Obamacare, was signed into law more than 4 years ago. Its main goals were to expand health coverage to millions of people who were uninsured and to make sure that the coverage they got provided real benefits. The law also contained many smaller provisions to promote higher quality and preventive care, like funding for public health programs. Next slide. Some provisions in the law kicked in immediately. For instance, young adults up to 26 years old were allowed to stay on their parents' health plan, which actually led to a measurable increase in insurance coverage for people in this age group. Insurance companies were also prohibited from denying coverage for children with pre-existing conditions. In 2012 and 2013, the federal government and some states began to create health marketplaces where people can buy individual and family plans, and some states began to expand their Medicaid programs. Next slide. In 2014, last year, the marketplaces launched, and people could go to them to buy health coverage. Subsidies help people afford coverage. So people who have incomes below 400% of FPL, or the federal poverty level, so that's a little less than $47,000 for an individual and less than $95,000 for a family of 4. So these people got subsidies under the ACA. States were also supposed to expand their Medicaid program, and many of them did. And so all in all, last year, about 16 million people gained health coverage. Next slide. So 2015 marks the second year of ACA coverage. So if you're uninsured, or if you've become uninsured in the last year, you might be eligible for either Medicaid or for a tax subsidy for marketplace coverage. You might also qualify for a subsidy if your employer provides insurance, but it doesn't meet certain income and adequacy standards. So it's important to act right now. If you currently have a marketplace plan, you have to renew it, and you should check your eligibility. And if you're uninsured, right now is the time to get insurance through a marketplace plan. We're in the period called open enrollment, which runs from November 15th to 2014, so just opened, to February 15th, 2015. But if you want coverage that starts on January 1st, you need to enroll in it by December 15th. Next slide. You also need to make sure you have coverage in order to avoid paying a penalty. So the law created two mandates. It requires individuals to have insurance. So in 2014, if you didn't have insurance, you'll be subject to a penalty of $95 for each adult in a household, half that amount for children, up to a maximum of $285. In 2015, that penalty goes up to $325 per adult, up to a maximum of nearly $1,000. There's also penalties for employers that will start in 2015. They apply to fairly large employers, to employers with more than 100 employees in 2015, and then to employers with more than 50 employees starting in 2016. And those employers have to provide coverage to full-time workers, which is defined as workers working more than 30 hours a week. And if they don't, then they also have to pay a penalty if those employees are getting coverage on the marketplace. Next slide. So in this section of the webinar, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Medicaid coverage. Next slide. So Medicaid is a program that's run by states, but it's subject to some federal law. States have the flexibility to design their Medicaid programs, so every state program looks a little bit different. But there's not a lot of consistency across states. There's certain things states have to cover, but they can provide more services and they can expand their populations of who's eligible. In the past, Medicaid programs covered people who fell into certain categories, such as people with disabilities or elders or families who were on welfare. The ACA required states to basically extend Medicaid coverage to all adults with incomes below 138 of the federal poverty level. So that's about 16,000, a little over 16,000 for a single person. Some states actually also, and already, even before the ACA, covered children and their parents with incomes above 100 FPL, in some states up to 300 of FPL, in either the state Medicaid program or what's called the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP. Next slide. So unfortunately, the Supreme Court said that states did not have to comply with the requirement in the ACA that states expand Medicaid. I mean, basically, they said that requirement's there, but there's nothing that the federal government can do about it if states choose not to expand Medicaid. So right now, only 27 states and the District of Columbia haven't complied with the Medicaid expansion requirement. And this map shows you can see the blue states are the ones that have expanded Medicaid. The two light blue states, Indiana and Utah, are sort of still debating whether to do it. Actually, I think Indiana is going to go ahead and do it. And then the orange states are states that have not chosen to expand Medicaid yet. And we're hoping and working to push the states that have not expanded to do so. Next slide. So you're eligible for Medicaid if you meet the income level, which, as I said, is about $16,000 for an individual and about close to $33,000 for a family of 4. You have to obviously live in a state that has chosen to expand Medicaid. If you don't live in one of those states, then I'm afraid that you're out of luck and you're not eligible for Medicaid. And unfortunately, you're also not eligible to get a subsidy on for a plan that's offered on the marketplace. You also have to have been lawfully present in the U.S. for 5 years. So if you're within that 5-year period and you haven't been here for 5 years, you can actually buy a marketplace plan and get a subsidy depending on your income. Depending on the state you live in, you might qualify for a Medicaid or for a CHIP if you're a parent, and your children also may qualify for those plans. In fact, if you have kids, they're likely to qualify for CHIP if you're below 200 or 300% of FPL, and as a parent, you may qualify too. Next slide. So although open enrollment, as I mentioned, for marketplace plans is going on now, and you have to enroll now for marketplace plans, you can actually apply for Medicaid and CHIP at any time during the year, and coverage starts as soon as you're deemed eligible. So how do you apply? Well, you can go directly to your state's Medicaid program. States usually have websites. But you can also go to the federal marketplace, which is where you go to sign up for these separate subsidized plans, and there will be a link there that will lead you back to your state. You'll answer a few questions if it seems like you're eligible for Medicaid because your income's the right amount. You will get essentially directed back to the Medicaid program or to whoever is in your state is taking applications for Medicaid. So this slide has links to healthcare.gov, which is the main federal marketplace, and that's where you would go and enter some basic information, and it would say, okay, you might be eligible for Medicaid, and you would get a link to link you back to apply for Medicaid. You can also get, so there's a lot of groups out there that are providing assistance to consumers who want to sign up for healthcare. And so if you go to this link, Local Help, and it will ask you where you live, and it will give you a list of organizations that provide in-person assistance. So that's it on Medicaid. So in this section of the webinar, I'll talk about getting marketplace coverage with a focus on subsidized coverage. So the marketplace is what was created in the law, and it's where you go to find health plans for individuals and families, especially if you don't have access to employer insurance. Well, for us in a minute, you must buy your coverage on the marketplace. If you have access to if you have access to employer-sponsored coverage, or if you don't have access to employer-sponsored coverage, but you make too much, your income is too high to qualify for a subsidy, you can still probably find a better deal on the marketplace. So you may want to go there and look for plans. So 16 states have their own marketplace, and other states you would just use the federal marketplace. And you can get to either type of marketplace to check eligibility and to look at plans and shop around for health coverage at healthcare.gov. That will lead you to the federal marketplace. It will ask you to put in the state you live in, and if your state has its own marketplace, it will provide a link for you to direct you back to the state marketplace where you would do the same thing. You could check eligibility and shop for plans. And I've noted on this slide the states that have their own marketplaces. They often have different names. So in California, it's called Covered California. In Massachusetts, it's the Connector, and so forth. So they're often not called marketplace. It's the federal marketplace is called the marketplace. Next slide. So how do you know if you're eligible for a subsidy? Well, you can qualify for a subsidy if your income is between 100 and 400% of the federal poverty level, and I'll explain what that means in the next slide. You have to be lawfully present in the U.S. You can't be eligible for any other government-sponsored insurance, such as Medicaid or Medicare. So if you're eligible for Medicaid, then you have to sign up for Medicaid or CHIP or Medicare. It might be that your children are eligible for CHIP, but your state doesn't provide coverage for parents of kids who are eligible for CHIP, in which case your kids would enroll in CHIP and you would enroll in a plan on the marketplace. And then to get a subsidy, you can't have access to insurance through your employer unless the insurance that your employer offers is considered not adequate or affordable. So what does that mean? What that means is if the cost of the premium for employer-sponsored insurance that you pay is more than 9.5% of your income for an individual plan, then it's deemed not affordable and you could get a subsidy. And if the plan doesn't pay for a certain amount of your total healthcare costs, in other words, if it doesn't pay for 60% on average of the total cost that the plan covers, then it would be considered not adequate, and you would be able to get a subsidy on the marketplace. So the idea is that insurance that your employer offers is sort of skimpy and costs too much, you can still get a subsidy. If you have an income below 250% of the federal poverty level, you can also get cost-sharing subsidies, which are separate from the tax credit. And basically what they do is reduce the amount of copays and the size of the deductible that you would owe for a plan. Next slide. So here's how the subsidy, and this is the tax credit subsidy, gets calculated. So first, you determine your income. And this is pretty similar to what you report on your tax form. That you're allowed to exclude some items, and you have to include any Social Security income you get and any foreign income you get. There's a couple ins and outs. It's pretty straightforward. I've included on this slide a link to a fact sheet that explains exactly what's counted and what's not counted. So that's the first step. And then once you've determined your household income, you find out the amount that you are expected to contribute to health coverage, given your income and family size. So this is basically, there's a sliding scale that sort of sets the amount that you're expected to contribute. And then the third step is that you figure out the cost of a certain, what's called a benchmark plan on the marketplace. And this is sort of a standard plan, and that the cost is sort of calculated given where you live in the state and how old you are. And then your subsidy is the cost of that plan minus minus your expected contribution. So for instance, if the cost of that plan is $300 a month and you're expected to contribute $100 a month, your subsidy would be $200 a month, and that would come in the form of a tax credit. Next slide. I think you need to go back one. So here's a chart showing what I just described, basically. So this shows at a bunch of different gradations of the federal poverty level. It shows both for individuals and for a family of 4 what the income at that particular FPL is, what the monthly premium contribution is. So the first column shows the federal poverty level. The second column just shows the cap that the law sets on what you're supposed to contribute towards a premium. And then the next 2 sets of columns show basically that calculation. So for instance, if you're at 200% of federal poverty level, your income, if you're an individual, that would be an income of $23,340. You'd be expected to contribute $123 a month. If you're at that level and you're a family of 4, your income would be $47,700, and you would be expected to contribute $252 a month towards a premium. Next slide. I think you need to go back. No, I think you need to go forward. Next one, yeah. So marketplace plans are organized in 4 categories: bronze, silver, gold, platinum, depending on the amount of coverage they provide. In general, platinum plans will have higher premiums, but they'll require less lower out-of-pocket costs. They might not have copays or deductibles, or they will have very small copays or deductibles. Bronze plans will have much lower premiums, but they may have higher cost sharing. They may also have more restricted networks. your subsidy is based on the cost of a silver plan. That is the benchmark plan that I talked about that the subsidy is calculated off of. So you could take your subsidy and buy a cheaper plan, and you would pay less than the expected premium contribution, or you could take your subsidy and buy a more expensive plan, and you would pay more than the expected premium calculation on the previous slide. Or you could buy a silver plan and it would be exactly what was calculated. If you want to get a cost-sharing subsidy, which further lowers the cost of out-of-pocket payments, you have to buy a silver plan. You have a choice. You can have your tax credit subsidy applied to the monthly premium cost, so that basically you pay a lower premium each month that is already taken into account the tax credit, or you can get the tax credit in a lump sum at the end of the year. And basically when you sit down and file your taxes, you'll reconcile the amount. So if you earned more income than you thought you were going to earn when you signed up and provided your initial information, you're going to end up owing some taxes. If your actual income turns out to be lower than you thought it was going to be, you'll get an additional money back from the IRS. But the bottom line is it's really important to report changes in income so you don't surprises in April. Just in the same way that you adjust your tax withholdings during the year for any kind of job, depending on your income. Next slide. So here's what you need to do. And in the case of marketplace coverage, you need to do it really soon. You should go to health. If you don't have coverage right now, you should go to healthcare.gov. Again, there's a link to determine whether you're eligible for a subsidy and to shop for health plans. You're going to need some basic information like your social security number, your employer's name, your current income, both for you and people in your household. And you'll want some other information about health coverage that people in your household might already have. And you want to think about your preferred doctor and hospital, because when you're shopping for plans, you're going to want to see if they're in your network, or if they're in the network of the plan that you're looking at. You can find in-person assistance at Local Help. This is a link that will, it's part of the federal website. It will allow you to put in your location and provide you with a list of organizations that provide a person you can talk to who will help you walk through the process. So it's really important to apply for coverage pretty soon. You have until February 15th to apply, but if you want coverage that starts on January 1st, 2015, you need to apply by December 15th. So that November to February period is called the open enrollment period, and that's basically really when you have to apply for coverage. If you have a certain types of life-changing event, like for instance, you have a baby or you get a new job, you can apply in what's called a special enrollment period. But again, that's only if you have one of these life-changing events. Otherwise, you need to apply during the open enrollment period. Okay, next slide. What if you got coverage in 2014 on the marketplace? Here's what you need to do in 2015. Next. So if you already have coverage that you got in 2014, there are a few things that you have to do. So first, you should update your information, your income and your household information on the marketplace. So the marketplace may already have it. You may have told them when you signed up. You may have given them authorization to collect and update your information from the IRS, but you should really go and do it yourself for a couple reasons. on which there are obviously some glitches last year, and so you want to, it's just a good idea to make sure that everything is accurate and up to date. But the other reason to do it is that even if your income hasn't changed, the cost of the silver reference plan might have changed, and so the amount of subsidy you get could have gone up, or it could have gone down. So to make sure that you're getting the correct subsidy, you really want to go update your information. And then the other thing you want to do is to go and take a look at your current plan and see if you're happy with it. Have your benefits and costs changed? And then you may want to comparison shop, because there are a lot of new, more affordable plans this year. So again, if you're renewing or changing plans, you need to do that by December 15th to avoid a gap in coverage. Next slide. So you should have received a notice from the marketplace about checking your eligibility for 2015 subsidies. Again, even if you don't receive a notice, it's still important to make sure your information is accurate, so you should go check that. If you go to the marketplace and you've forgotten your password from last year, there's a place that you can reset it, and so that you can log in again. The second thing you should do, and this is separate this is a separate notice, is you should get a letter from your health plan describing any plan changes. If you don't do anything, coverage in the plan you have will be renewed, and if the plan that you're in is discontinued, you'll get switched over to a plan that is similar as possible to your current plan. So again, if you make changes or enroll in a new plan after December 15th, your coverage will not start on January 1st. So you can do nothing and automatically enroll, but again, you may want to shop around and see what other options are available. And if you are changing and choosing another option, you need to do that by December 15th, or you're going to have a gap in coverage. Okay. So finally, I just wanted to mention a couple of resources for people who are looking for more information. So I've mentioned this one a couple of times. www.healthcare.gov brings you to the federal marketplace. There's all kinds of information there, and that's also where you can go to comparison shop or browse for plans and to sign up for a plan to determine eligibility and so forth. And again, you can get linked back to your state marketplace there. SEIU also has a health reform website, Ready for Healthcare, that has a lot of information and fact sheets on it, and some cute little videos. Families USA is a great organization that has a ton of information for everybody, really, for health consumers, for advocates, and even for policy experts like me. And then if you want to just sort of check to see what kind of subsidy estimate that you might be eligible for, I like the Kaiser Foundation Health Insurance Marketplace Calculator, which is a little quick calculator where you can calculate subsidy levels. So that's it, and we're going to be doing a forum and taking your questions in a week.